Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not Enough. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, really appreciate it. This week I'm speaking with Lorie Bond Saadipour. Now, this is just an absolutely fascinating, impactful conversation we're going to have today. Lorie speaks about her childhood growing up with a mother who suffered from mental illness. And that mental illness that she suffered from was, at the time, called paranoid schizophrenia. We talk about how it's mostly just schizophrenia with different subsets now, if you will. But this is a conversation that kind of covers the difficulties she experienced in her life because of her mom's mental illness. It's about the struggles she had getting proper treatment and care for her mother within the system, and some of the breakdowns and places where the system failed her and her mother. It's about how this whole process impacted her life as a whole. You know, she spent a good chunk of her life kind of hiding her mother's mental illness and hiding that side of herself, trying to cover for her mom. And when her mom would say something that would, scare other people, frankly, she tried to, kind of tamper it down and make excuses. She spent a lot of her time trying to make sure that her mother was in a home or a center that was going to be adequate for her. She spent a lot of time, worrying about her mother's well-being. It was something that impacted her life even beyond childhood. And she speaks to me about this because she wrote a book that talks a lot about this impact in her life. And her book was called The Voices We Couldn't Hear. It's all about her mother's story and, her role in that story. We're going to touch on just so much. We'll start kind of with mental illness as a whole. We'll talk about exactly what schizophrenia is. We'll talk about the impacts in her life. We'll talk about some of the failures in the mental health system. We're going to talk about why there's so much stigma around mental health. Mental health is an illness. It's a disease, just like anything else. Just like having a heart condition or diabetes or anything else. But we look at it as something very, very different. So we'll talk about those stigmas. We'll talk about the writing process and how this book ultimately allowed her to heal and close those chapters on her life, and that helped her, have a better relationship with her husband, have a better relationship with the world as a whole when she didn't feel like she was kind of guarding and hiding all of this, all this impact that she had experienced. We're going to talk about how the final stages of her mother's life and how she kind of became closer to her through some things that happened. But I think that you're really, really going to find this conversation a really, really impactful one. We can all learn a lot from it. I think we all know somebody who experiences mental health issues, and that may be a family member, a friend, and it may be yourself. So I think this is a really, really powerful conversation. Here is Lorie Bond Saadipour. I'm here today with Lorie Saadipour. Ms. Saadipour, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're just going to dive right in. I want you to kind of introduce yourself and then introduce your book. And the book's called The Voices We Couldn't Hear.
Yes, thank you again for the opportunity. So, my name's Lorie Saadipour, and I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, as a child. I moved around a lot. But I consider, Alexandria to really be my home base because that's where I spent most of my time as a young child. I wrote The Voices We Couldn't Hear. It's a memoir, a story, a personal story about my life and of my mother's, who suffered from debilitating paranoid schizophrenia. And all of my life, I sheltered and tried to hide and run away from this difficult life that I was in. And up until now, I decided that there was just so much missing from my life, from the secrets. And I don't want to say so much the lies, but I felt like I was living two separate lives because I would hide and try to, avoid speaking about family, about my real life situation to others. And I just didn't know what was normal, what wasn't normal. I knew that my life wasn't normal
Hmm.
and that I was dealing with a tough situation, having to deal with mom with mental health issues and really lacking a support, being estranged from family, and having to deal with growing up myself
Hmm.
and learning what to do with my life and trying to help my mother on the way was a very challenging time for me. So I just decided that I would write about it and tell all as a really for my own healing and closure to all of the things that we had to endure and suffer. And that's what it's been about for me personally. My background, I never went to college. Um, I excelled through hard work and determination. Uh, just trying to prove myself to others and to offices. I had managed a dental practice, a specialty practice for over 20 years with very high end, clientele. So I learned a lot of skills to get me through. But I've always been in that survival mode
Hmm.
all of my life, having to work harder, I felt, than others to achieve the very basics
Hmm.
that one deserves to achieve in their life.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about myself.
Yeah, and I want to unpack quite a bit of what she said, and I want to start just at the very basics. And this may be a really difficult question because neither one of us are doctors, so I don't necessarily want to dive into it at a deep level. But for people who don't know, they've just heard the word paranoid schizophrenia, kind of at a 1,000-foot level. What does that mean? What is that?
So paranoid schizophrenia is a mental health issue. It's mental illness on an extreme level. It's one of the worst kinds because there is delusions, there is, visions that the schizophrenic sees. There are different realities to for them that are not real. So delusions, this is what they live with. And so I've had to, as a small child, I've had to deal with knowing that my mother lived in a different world than everyone else, and that she would perceive something, a nice gesture from someone, if they're bringing flowers to the house. I knew that at the end of the day, she would think they're trying to poison us, or she would think that this was a bad omen. So I had to live knowing that there were two different lives that I was living simultaneously. There was this evil, uh, you know, life that my mother was suffering through, and then there was the normal one, and I'm sitting right outside the door of it. So it's a terrible, debilitating disease and illness that they still don't understand. And again, as you pointed out, I'm no doctor, but through the experience, there is no cure for it. They have medications, but once a person with this disease, with this illness, gets to an advanced stage, it's very hard to talk them into medications, because the thought process from them is that someone is out to harm them. And if you can get past that and get them on medication and stabilize them mentally, then people can live normal lives. But that wasn't the case for my mother. She had reached a far advanced stage where there was really, no way to help her with medication unless she was forced to take it. And this is where the system failed me and my family, because, we were minors, and she was given the medication, which she refused to take. And she, could not be forced to take it. So we were in limbo. We had the help, but the law protected her and said she has these rights, that she can choose not to accept treatment. So that was the struggle throughout my childhood, is that yes, there was help for her, but she didn't accept it. And as years went by, she just declined mentally. She declined, and it got to the point where it really wasn't going to help her at all at that point to try to get her on medication. And when I was old enough, I spoke to a few people and got some advice, some good advice, to try to become her guardian, to make decisions for her, knowing that she couldn't make sound decisions for herself. She wanted to be on the street. She didn't want to be in the apartment. She didn't want to be in our home anymore because of the voices that, they were just, they were tormenting her. And she felt safer outside on the streets. And she had a home, but she was homeless. And so I decided to seek help from legally. And so I became her guardian. It was a very difficult process because there are a lot of people that don't have good intentions, and the court systems know that. But after reviewing my case and seeing that she didn't own a home, she didn't own property, she didn't own, a big bank account. She had nothing but a bag of clothes. That's all she owned, and a small Social Security check. They realized this is pretty straightforward, and allowed me to become her guardian, to make decisions for her. And I think that others out there that suffer the same fate aren't so lucky, because if their loved one owns property, or has a trust, or has more assets, they're probably going to have to really work very, very hard to earn the trust of a judge to allow them guardianship, to make those choices that the mentally ill really can't make for themselves. And it causes trauma in the whole family when you're dealing with situations like that. That's why I think this book is, not only was it for my own healing and closure, but I think that it also reaches out to a community that has suffered similar situations like myself, that don't know what to do, that have reached roadblocks, and that just the system is designed not really, they have systems in place to help you, but they're overwhelmed. These institutions are overwhelmed and under financed. They don't have enough resources to really focus on the needs of each family. And you're really out there needing to advocate for yourself. And the more information that you know, the better, because these are things that will happen to families, and they'll reach roadblocks. And what ends up happening is the ill the mentally ill will end up on the streets or using, drugs or something more serious. Because sometimes paranoid schizophrenia can be violent. Some of the people who suffer from this illness, there is violence involved. And luckily, with my mother, there wasn't. Although there were thoughts of violence. She was almost in a state of possession, if you will. She saw demons, and she heard voices telling her to do things, to throw things in the trash, to get rid of the electricity in the house, to cook food that's completely rotten from the trash can, to ignore animals that have died under the house that are decaying and smell the smell of rot. The voices command her to do and to think, and it goes against everything that's logical in life. And so this is a level of suffering that I can't even begin to, explain. And I know that there are people out there that have these similar situations, and what most of the time ends up happening is the families become estranged with their loved ones because they just can't live with those conditions. It's too scary. It's too dangerous. It's hurtful. It's very, very painful. And so I would say that we have a government system that can do more. And I would like to start advocating for this type of service for service, for families, because I do know that the government is underfunded in these areas and overwhelmed. And you can point fingers and blame social service people, and the caretakers and the people that are there working full time. Most of the cases are they're working overtime, and they're not willing to pay overtime for these employees that are helping families. And there's an emergency with a family member at 8 p.m. Well, there's no one to call. There's no one on duty. You'll have to call in the morning, and by that, someone could be dead. The hospitals aren't designed to take care of mentally ill patients, although they do have some hospitals have a ward, a section for, severely mentally ill that are in a position where they might harm themselves or others, but they can only hold them for 24 hours. And so I've done all of that. I've been down that road, and I know the system very well. And that's another topic in itself that we could really dive into. And I have some, great ideas. Unfortunately, it's reaching the right people to try to uncover a lot of these ideas, and try to reach common ground and understanding of what is it that these families truly need. So having medication, giving them a prescription, giving them, an appointment to see a medical, psychiatrist is a great start, but it's just not enough, because mental illness is a very serious illness, and it takes a lot more to assist a family in those types of needs. So I want to bring awareness. I do want to bring awareness to this. It's dear to my heart. My mother passed away 3 years ago, and that's what really compelled me to write this book, because I felt that I needed to be her voice, that I needed to speak about this, something that I was so ashamed of all of my life.
Yeah, and we talk. You're talking about how the struggles with the system, and then obviously the struggles that you dealt with your mom, and kind of the feeling of helplessness on making sure that the system provides adequate care. the helplessness of kind of understanding, some of the things that were happening with your mom. So I just wonder on your side of things, what did that do to your own mental health? And I just feel like that was a constant battle, and that's probably why you've written the book. But I want to talk a little bit about you through this process and what that's done to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jackson, for that. It is, there's a lot of events, unfortunate events that have occurred as I grew up in this situation, in this environment. It was terrible on my self-esteem. I had no faith in myself. I was very insecure. Everyone said to me, "Oh, you're such a beautiful girl. You're this, you're that," but I didn't see myself that way. I saw myself as worthless because I was not truthful about who I was and what I was going through. I had to hide it. So I had to put on a happy face that wasn't so happy inside. And I had to be strong and pretend, and it really psychologically it affected me to the point that I started using drugs. Um, I was um, I was placed in juvenile, confinement because I started to lash out. I started to become a real problem child as I got older, and as I got older, the the less help that I got because I was an older child now, and so I didn't get as much consideration as I was getting as a younger child. So life became more and more difficult for me. And as a result of that, I turned to drugs, alcohol. I started running. I I can't even count how many group homes and foster homes I was in and out of. Most of them threw me out. Um, and the ones that didn't, I ran away from. So that was my life. And in between all of that and trying to go to school just didn't happen for me. So there were a lot of breakdowns within my life. And it, it got to the point where I realized after I became an adult and my mother was so far advanced in her illness that she now had signs of dementia and Alzheimer's. And once that happened and she was on the streets and I was living, yeah, I rented a room trying to get my life back together, having a full-time job. I felt guilty. I could not move forward with my life knowing that she was in that condition. So I spent most of my young adult life trying to get her into a facility where she was safe and all of her medical needs were met, and just basic day-to-day life skills were available to her. And that's what I did. I pushed and I put her on waiting lists, and I advocated for her, and I finally got her institutionalized for years, and um, and that was safe to a certain point. But I just never gave up.
Well, I mean, I think that from what I'm hearing, obviously it put a big impact on you, but it sounds like she was extremely lucky to have you advocating for her because, like you said, there's a lot of people that aren't getting that. So I think you should give yourself a lot of credit
Yes.
there.
Thank you so much. And I also, just to add to that, the problems didn't go away once she wasn't institutionalized. She would run away from there herself,
Hmm.
and so they had to put a brace on her as a runaway, high risk. She was always trying to come back to me, and so there was always the challenges. Even as she aged, even as she progressed in her illness, there was the next set of challenges. So it was always through my childhood, through my adult life. She was a person, my mother, that I had to take care of all of my life. So I think in the beginning, had things really had services really been available to help her earlier on, I don't think it would have gotten to that point.
Hmm.
It really wouldn't have. I think it's so important for people and for your listeners to know that early stages is the most important stages to tackle this illness because it will help in the future and it will prevent a lot of damaging and you know, problems that are not reversible in the future. And so I think that that's a big undertaking for anybody to have to deal with. But to put more effort into that area in the beginning, to get services, to push for them, to advocate for your loved one, and not to give up, and to keep seeking those services through government agencies, local agencies, asking questions, things that I really didn't know what to do because, as a child, you look at these people and you say, oh my God, they know what they're doing. They're professionals. And, as a child looking at an adult in that position, you think that they've got it together and they know exactly what to do for you. But that's not so. So that would be my takeaway from this.
Yeah, and we're talking about some of the shortcomings within the system, and I think some of it also just leads back to, I guess, the stigmas behind mental illness. And you talked about some of your own journey in addiction. The stigmas behind addiction is there too. I think that's why we have trouble sometimes finding the funding because of the stigma. When somebody has a mental illness, it's really, I mean, it's the same type of thing as if somebody has a heart condition, but we look at it so much differently. I just want
Absolutely.
I just wonder why, if you have any idea why you think that's the case. And then also, I know that you have ideas about the one side. So I wonder what your thoughts are of how we can, I guess, change those stigmas.
Yeah, that's a great, great question, and one that is very complicated.
Hmm.
Um, Stigma of mental illness is definitely out there. When people are not comfortable with something, they tend to shy away from it. They tend to avoid it. And dealing with someone with mental health issues, mental illness, is something that people shy away from because they don't understand it. They don't know how to deal with it. It's foreign to them. And they're viewed as cast-offs. They're viewed as crazy people. It's scary to some people. And I think there needs to be a better understanding of how to approach someone with mental illness, how to, you know, um, ease the stigma of, the insecurities and the safety issues with people that have these conditions. Like I said, there are so many different levels of mental illness. There's depression, there's, bipolar. There are all sorts of things that are out there, but paranoid schizophrenia is probably one of the worst because it's linked to murder, it's linked to violence, and so people do have to understand and be educated what makes these people tick, what how to deal with them. Why can't we approach them? And there's a flip side to it. People have to feel safe. People have to know that they're safe. So it's a conversation to be had. And I don't lessen how anyone feels about any situation. If you're scared, you're scared. But I think knowledge is power. And the more we know and understand about mental health issues and mental illness, the better we are to face and to deal with them. They're in our homes, our family members. We may know a friend, a loved one, a cousin, grandparents that have suffered through this. and knowledge, knowing that, the illness, understanding it, is very helpful. So I think it should be an open conversation about illness. And also, there's a lot of movies, there's a lot of Hollywood that depicts uh, people that suffer from paranoid schizophrenia or schizophrenia. They don't really even call it paranoid schizophrenia anymore. They only call it, just schizophrenia, because there's different, tiers of schizophrenia. Hollywood has really promoted the fear in a lot of people with these types of illnesses. And so when we have, Hollywood against mental illness, when we have, stories, scary stories that portray illnesses like this in such a dangerous and scary way, it doesn't help with the stigmas that are out there. That's where they come from. They come from storytelling. They come from other people's experiences. And I think that if we look at it differently from a more educational perspective, I think we'll see these humans that just need help. They are traumatized. They're tormented in their own bodies, and we have the means to help them.
Yeah, and when we're kind of shifting to the book, I just wonder, you talked about earlier how you spent a great deal of your life kind of, I guess the word would be kind of hiding your past and hiding some of the things that were happening. So what was your journey to from the point of hiding these things to now writing a book and sharing it with others and being on podcasts like this? Because that had to be quite the journey.
It was an incredible burden that was lifted off of me. And that's the only way, that's the best way that it describes what I had to deal with. When my mother was dying, she was in hospice, and I brought her home to die at home at the end of her life. And it allowed me to reflect on so many different things in so many different ways. She was now nonverbal, laying in bed, and I think we had the best relationship those last 2 years of her life, because it was nonverbal. She wasn't able to jump up and go down the street and almost get hit by a car and do erratic things that she did, that I had to always be so careful of. I was no longer having to fear that she would say something in a group of, around my friends, that would spook them, or look a certain way, a gaze, a very strange and scary gaze. And someone would say something and she would just continue that gaze, and it would make it so awkward for me. And I would have to, like, try to figure out how to change that mood and pretend and try to divert attention somewhere else. I was constantly doing that. I wasn't enjoying my life. And for the last 2 years, as your question, coming back to that, I had so much time to reflect on all of that. And I said, what is all of the hiding? What is all of the, why didn't I just scream out for help? Maybe, my perception of people and my embarrassment kept me from getting some help, some of the help that I actually needed. But I couldn't get past it because of the trauma earlier on, which is in my book, of my mother, my father, abuses that I endured being, a child that fended for herself. But I had that time to reflect. And that is when I said, it is time to heal from this. She is laying here in bed. She's dying. She's now looking at me, and we have this communication that I've never had with my mother, through our eyes, through our touch, through changing her diaper and extracting her poop. It was just something that I did for the last 2 years of her life. And I said, something good has to come out of this. I have, my book is has a little bit of spirituality in it as well, that I dive into. that allows me to reason with the things that happened and the reason why I had to do them. I feel like that was my closure. And once I was able to decide that I was going to open up and tell all, this is where the healing started for me. And I wish there were so many things that were done differently. I wish I had done so many things differently. But looking back, how could I have? I was 7 years old. I was 9 years old. I was 11 years old. I was asking too much of myself, and it is what it is. But I would just say that yes, this book at the end has closed the doors for me and has allowed me to heal from this. And I want to take it further. I don't know in the future. I'm considering, possibly creating a movie from this book. I don't know if that will happen, but we will have to wait and see if that's something that is a possibility in the near future for this book.
Hmm. Yeah, and I normally I ask the question, when people write about their lives, how they did it, if the book they found as therapeutic, if they found it as just somebody else's life just to get it down on paper so others could read. You've talked a lot about how it was really therapeutic for you. So I wonder what you hope that the readers get from it. Is it to learn from your journey and I guess find their own strength and perseverance through different things? Is it more I guess that's the ultimate question. What do you hope that the readers learn from your book?
Yeah, thank you, Jackson, for that. I um, I really hope that through me opening up, through all of the suffering and all of the embarrassments, all of the difficult times that I had, that I handled it the way that I did, I would hope that whoever reads this book can find the strength and courage to open up earlier on, to make people aware of what they are going through, what they're suffering, to reach out for help, not to be embarrassed about it. This is life. This is what life has dealt me, and this is what life will unfortunately uh, you know pass on to someone else, and they'll have to suffer the same events that I had to suffer through loved ones going through mental illness. But my ultimate recommendation and hope that someone gets out of this book is the strength to be vocal, almost as an activist, if you will, about this issue, and to cry out for help, and not try to take it on yourself, and not be embarrassed about it. There's nothing to be embarrassed about having someone with mental illness. It's not your fault. And I always thought it was my fault. I always thought my family was cursed. And so I didn't open up. And as a result, I suffered even more, because I may have gotten more help if I had been more vocal. The bottom line is that it doesn't hurt to try. It doesn't hurt to try, and to seek out as many resources as possible.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
Yeah. So through writing it, you talked a lot about closure. Did you, I guess, what did that process look like? Was it truly, okay, I've got it down on paper. I can kind of close that chapter of my life. I can do that. Or was it, opening up old wounds and having to kind of really examine them and figure out, your true feelings behind it. So I wonder whether it was just that perfect closure or whether it was a little more struggle than that.
It was all of those things. It was a struggle to write this book. There were days where it would take me 3 months to get through one chapter. There were other days where I was just on a roll and my memory allowed me to keep going. There were days that I cried just writing chapters of this book. I just couldn't stop the tears from flowing down my face. And I still tear up when I talk about, stories and different tragedies that occurred along the way in my life. That was part of the healing process, is tearing myself back down, facing those horrible things that happened to us, and really examining it in my mind, and knowing that there's always other ways to handle things. The way that I handled it, this was the end result. And maybe through someone else's perception, or um, reading this book, maybe they can have a better understanding of, well, maybe if I did this, or maybe she shouldn't have done that. Maybe she should have done this, and he could have had a better out. It gets us to critical thinking, especially if you're one that is suffering from mental illness, or have family members. It'll get you really thinking about different avenues, and that was also the objective for this book, is to allow others to read my experiences, my failures, my suffering, my struggle. And in the end, this book ended with my mother's death. So it was a lifetime for me, through her life, from the time that I remember to the time of her death, of having to deal with her illness. And I can see, so many others giving up and straying and not knowing where their family is, because they just can't handle it. They can't deal with it. But there are certainly options. And so the end of the book, through the book, writing it, was a struggle. It was painful. It was traumatizing again. It opened up wounds for me that, I buried so deeply. Times when I was raped, times when I was, treated so badly. I suppressed that information, those memories, and having to write about it. It was just, it was just picking a scab and it bleeding all over again. And so, but I knew that I had to get through this in order to get to my final destination, which is the end of the book, which is where I felt, now I have it down. Now I've been my voice, and I've been my mother's voice, who could never get the right help because she couldn't. She was ill. Now I'm her voice. Now everyone knows what happened to her. And there's also history of her growing up, and what she experienced as a child. I thought that was helpful to understand where she came from and what she suffered as, a child herself, to better understand why she did the things that she did and how she got to where she got. And it's interesting because I also mention in the book different occasions where it started to become apparent that she was mentally ill. No one saw it, no one understood it, and a lot of people dismissed her because she was Hispanic and had a very heavy accent, had a very heavy English accent. So when she would say things, they would say, well, maybe she doesn't understand English very well. But I understood what her thought process was, and it was of someone very psychotic. But things were dismissed along the way. So I hope and pray that whoever picks up the book will find it helpful and interesting to read, and come away with something as a result of it.
Absolutely. And I want to kind of, in wrapping things up, you talked about how the book kind of led you to your final destination here. And I just wonder what does life look like? I want to ask you a little bit about, your life now. You've written the book, you've been able to have some of that closure, and then also just to, I guess, make this question even piling even more into it is, we talked earlier how the book is Lorie Bond, and then your married name now is Saadipour. So I just wonder what that process looked like too, just because your lived experience as a young person was very different than most people, and that always you bring those lived experiences into your life and into your relationship. So I wonder what that journey has looked like, because I've talked to a lot of people that had some very, very traumatic things happen to them as kids, and that doesn't end. That they bring that into their relationships, and that creates some journeys and some struggles as well.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm glad you pointed that out. Um, I feel after I've written this book and I've gotten the monkey off my back, as they say, I feel that I have been able to enjoy things, simple things, much better. I have been able to enjoy my relationship with my husband a lot better. It feels real now. It didn't feel so real before because there was something inside of me that no one else knew. There were these horrible secrets and horrible things that no one knew. Now that it's out in the open, I really feel uh, things are things feel better to me. Things feel more normal. This is a story. This is what happened. I lived through it, and I embrace it now. And I thank my mother for the lessons and for my life. I'm grateful. I try to stay in a state of gratitude because, I'm not the only person that has gone through traumatic events. And I put things in perspective. I can't continue my life feeling sorry for myself or, having these, issues. So I try to be as honest and vocal as possible. And I try to be as kind to others as possible. And, I hold on to my faith. I have a Catholic background, and that helps me a lot. It helps me stay in this state of grace and peace. I feel like I have more harmony in my life. I still have pains and I still have thoughts that haunt me, but I hold on to those things and I don't suppress them anymore. I allow myself to cry when I need to cry. I allow myself to talk about things that I need to talk about. So there's no more hiding. And I think that that has really created a different perspective for me, a different feeling about life in itself, because things are real now. Things are honest and open, and I can breathe better.
No, I love that, and I think there's so much more that we could talk about. There's so much more of your story that can be shared, and you did share it within your book. So tell people how they can find the voices we couldn't hear.
Yes, thank you, Jackson. So right now I'm self-published, and the book is a paperback. You can also get it in on ebook. The Voices We Couldn't Hear. You can just go to Amazon.com. You can click on, type in The Voices We Couldn't Hear, and it will pop right up. Or you can go to my webpage, which is www.thevoiceswecouldn'thear.com, and it will have a link take you directly to the Amazon page where you can purchase the book. So thank you for that. I have some contact information on my webpage. If anyone has questions or wants to reach out, any thoughts or anything like that, I'm very open to that. So that is also available on my webpage. They can reach out to me that way as well.
Yeah, the links to the book and to your webpage will be in the show notes. Yeah, I really, really appreciate your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Jackson. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate the time that you've given me. And this is such an important subject. So thank you.
So that was Lorie Bond Saadipour. Really, really appreciated her time. Learned a ton this week about just the impact of mental health. Of course, we've talked to a lot of people in the past who have dealt with their own mental health struggles. One of my first interviews was actually with somebody who experiences suicidal thoughts and how he has moved that into, I guess, the world of comedy. So that's certainly an interesting one. But we haven't talked a ton about the impact that it has on others and the caregivers of people who are dealing with these issues. So I appreciate Lorie talking to us about that. It was certainly challenging at times. It was an emotional conversation because, this is tough stuff, and I give Lorie all the credit in the world for everything that she's done in her life for her mother. There's tons of people in the world that don't have a Lorie there advocating for them. So I think that can't be discounted at all. I give her a ton of credit for writing this book and finally kind of conquering those fears of being out there and sharing her story, and that story is going to help others. So if this is a story that resonates with you and something that you think that you can learn more from, I urge you to check out her book. The link to her book will be in the show notes. The Voices We Couldn't Hear. It's on Amazon. It's on her website. If you want to reach out to her directly, she mentioned that too. So you can find that on her website. I really appreciate Lorie's time. I appreciate you being here. If you haven't already, go subscribe on Apple and on Spotify. Leave a written review on Apple. That helps a ton. Leave a 5-star review on Apple and on Spotify. Helps as well. Follow on Instagram, Not Enough Podcast. Not Enough Jackson F on Facebook, jacksonf.com. Lots of places to follow along. You'll want to do that. That way you don't miss any of the other interviews coming up. A lot of amazing guests upcoming and over 175 guests now in the past. So I urge you to check those out. But if you do nothing else, catch us next week. Take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or, hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.